It's nice.
Yeah, if you ever get down that direction, it's there. Trumbull Hotel or Sullivan. Well, Sullivan's was
Yes,
that's when we were there too early in the day. But Trumbull Hotel, you can go to Sullivan Falls.
Yes, that's the other thing.
It sounds crazy,
Yeah.
they're so
Pretty cool.
good. This one's getting under.
Does not sound appetizing.
No, they're really good.
That's what happens when you're-
And I don't usually take some of the but they're not.
Usually late,
And then you get to watch trains go by and you watch the river. It's fun.
If you want to comfortable.
Just a little bit, got 2 minutes.
28.
I reminded Kevin, meeting change. No, I wasn't here last time. There should be.
This room is either ace cold
Yeah.
or burning up.
Yeah. Fluctuates quite a bit.
Seem to save electricity.
Well, yeah.
Charge.
But it's interesting, if you turn them on,
Sure.
if you turn the fans on, you can't really tell.
I said Charlie.
Charlie wanted,
It's Charlie's plan.
yeah, say, shut the cameras on. Said it cost a lot of money.
Mood lighting, Tanya. It's mood lighting.
Back in the clear too.
Joe, right, Joe?
Yeah.
I can see that.
It was there in the thing.
Charlie's getting fishing, you know. Can't
Meeting to order? Jane?
Penny Verstead.
Here.
Chris Freeman.
Here.
Johnny Huseby. Here. Clint Moses.
Here.
Amy Jill Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
David Steiger.
Here.
Kim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson. Tricia Martin.
We have a quorum. We have 8 of our board members here tonight. Remind everybody to turn their mics on. Steve is trying to live stream the meeting tonight, so give a thumbs up that it's working. So, thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Agenda order approval revision. Any changes for tonight's meeting? Jim?
I'd like, items 3 and 4 under the consent agenda to be moved to the action agenda. For policy items, it should be voted on separately.
Anything else? Okay. Item D, we have no conversations. Item E, communications, anything, Jim? Thank you.
I just checked.
Item F, board member,
I
superintendent.
have a question about that, communications. Since we're now meeting here, are community members permitted to come and speak since it's a public meeting, we're not doing anything online anymore?
They could be, it's up to the board.
Because it seems like if we're not doing virtual meetings, then instead of restricting them to emails, they should probably be allowed to be here. Because that's what we've done before.
I would think in lieu of the new restrictions, the lifting of stuff today, I don't see an issue unless any other board members do.
I don't see an issue, I just think it'd be nice to have a heads up though, so we can kind of plan for spacing and stuff. If we get like a huge response where there's a bunch of people showing up, that might be a problem. Other than that, certainly.
Okay? Okay. Board members, superintendent communications, board members.
Very quiet.
We see there's your fish that you showed everybody else.
I got good eyes, I can show you.
Do you want me to go while you're doing that, Dave?
Yeah,
Okay,
3 column plus pass.
that is nice. Do any other board members have something?
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to share for information, let you know that Scotty and I, pretty contentious,
boundary appeal between Hudson and Somerset. And I didn't have, it was a backup person in case somebody didn't show. It was all by Zoom. And then previous to that, I was actually on the one for Eau Claire and Elm Mound. And I just want everybody to know that that's what I've been doing in my spare time.
This last week or so, or?
Yeah, since last meeting, both of those.
I think. Anybody else? Okay, Joe.
Most of my report will be part of the COVID-19 report, but I just want to give a shout out to Menomonie High School. Terrific job with the virtual graduation ceremony. It was aired Friday night. It's also available on demand on the Fox 25 website. Certainly it's not the same as recognizing our students in person, but I thought Mr. Drake and everyone there did a really nice job organizing it. I thought it was well done, and congratulations to the class of 2020.
Here.
Yes, I like that as well, Joe, thought it was very well done. The only thing my kids said is they were pausing between the reading of the names, and I told my youngest, who's 13, that's to give effect, right? That's how they build it up.
Well, Dave, I talked to some parents that watched it, and they were really happy with it. And they talked about how neat it was to actually watch it with their graduate. You know, because typically the graduates are sitting by themselves, and just getting them the opportunity to actually have their arm around their son or daughter and, you know, give them a hug, and then even seeing the classmates and the kids that grew up, and they have all these memories that they were talking about throughout the ceremony. It sounded like it was pretty neat.
I will echo that. I know as the Downsville kids came up, they were talking in our household too. So, yeah, that was my classmate in grade school. Very nice. Okay, revenue and expense reports.
Okay,
And welcome back too.
thank you. If you want to take a look at the revenue report first. For May 2020, we received our personal property aid payment from the Department of Revenue, so that's been receipted in. You'll find that under the computer aid line item there. So the total revenues for Fund 10, our general fund, were $24,179,211.31. In Fund 21, our gift donation fund, we received in $127,351.78. And then in special education, through May, we received in $1,707,200.67. Next, if we take a look at the expenses by object report, you'll see overall, for all the funds, this isn't just the general fund, this includes all funds. The total year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date percentage was 69.08 as compared to 68.88% last year. So up slightly. You know, the majority of our budget is in salaries and benefits. So you can see what those costs are. As you go down the line item, you'll see, for example, utilities are less than they were last year. I took a look at that. Our gas for heat bills were down this year as compared to last year. I'm assuming that's due to the weather more so than, say, the school closure or anything like that. But you can look at the various line items and see, you know, travel, transportation, that's down, and then supplies, paper, that line item, those accounts are down. So those are due to the closure.
I was just curious about the textbooks and equipment, just seems really backwards, so I just I was curious as to why.
Why, we had planned on purchasing some textbooks this year, but we weren't able to because we couldn't pilot them with the students due to the shutdown. So they're scheduled to be purchased next year,
Okay.
when kids come back.
Do you anticipate, Leah, that some of these that are low percentage year to date are gonna catch up by the end of the fiscal year? Or do you think a lot of them are gonna finish really low?
I think they're gonna finish really low. I mean, there are some items that we've paid, it's bill timing, we paid ahead of time this year. Normally, we wait to the end of the year to pay. For example, our 4K sites, they've been shut down, and so we made the decision to pay them for what we owe them earlier than we would in a normal year. Normally, we wait till the end of June to make that payment. So there is some of that, but I do anticipate the majority of the ones that are down staying down. And then the last report, the expenses by function. This is just the general fund, operations fund. There again, the expenses through May 2020 are 63.62% this year compared to 62.99% compared to last year. So just up slightly there. Fund 27, we're at 78.41% compared to 79.09, so slightly less. There again, there are some services that haven't been able to be offered due to this shutdown and such. So whether it be transportation or people services. And then Fund 50, our food service fund, we're at 82.18% as compared to 91.76% last year.
Any other questions for Leah? Okay, thanks, Leah. Okay, move on to the consent agenda, minus items 2 and 3.
3 and 4.
3 and 4, sorry. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Amy,
Second.
Penny with second. Any discussion? Okay, Jamie, vote. Okay, motion carries 8-0. Moving on to the action agenda. Just 1 second, I refresh my computer so that I have it. Okay, we'll start with action to approve renewal of district insurance for 2020-21 property liability and workman's comp. Is there a motion to approve? So, is there a second? Charlie? Discussion. We did talk about this a bunch at our last meeting. Anybody have any questions at all? Okay, let's vote. Jamie? Okay, motion carries 8-0. Second item under the action agenda, action to approve addition to the 2020-21 staffing plan. Is there a motion? Jim, second. Chris? Joe?
Dave, this is adding another network support person in our technology department. We did have a resignation at the end of the school year. Even before that resignation, the tech department was stretched very thin, and especially with remote learning and all the additional needs having to do with the pandemic, the technology needs, this is a position that is very much needed. It probably is needed moving further in beyond just next year, but for sure for the 2020, 2021 year, we do need extra help in the technology department.
Okay, discussion. Charlie?
I'm a little bit confused. Are we approving to replace the person that resigned or an additional person?
An additional position.
I don't know how many will be in that department now, that can be 5 or 6 then.
Well, Katie's the director, and then Morgan is the data specialist that works real close with Katie. Then we would have 2 help desk technicians and 2 network specialists. So
So instead of one network specialist, we have two.
Third guest person sounds like.
Right, actually, the configuration this year was 2 network specialists and 1 help desk person.
Oh.
And this will end up being 2 and 2. And if you look at the number of devices we have, and the number of buildings we're serving, it's pretty amazing that that few people can serve that large of a need for our school district.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, Jean? Okay, motion carries, passes 8-0. Item C, action to approve policy 343.46, early college credit program. Motion to approve. Jim, second? Penny?
We talked about this last time, Brian did the work on this, it's really just a change in the name of the program, so the policy matches.
Any discussion? Okay, Jim? Okay, motion carries 8-0. The final one, actually, Joe said does not need action, it's simply an administrative rule, so. So there won't, unless there's any discussion on that. Okay, move on to discussion items. A, statement related to discrimination and racism in the SDM. Amy, if you want to start, this was asked for the agenda.
Well, I like the idea that you put policy in there, but I think it needs to be a little deeper. And I did put some examples in here, down below Denver and Eau Claire and, the city council of Eau Claire. And then an article about, some considerations you need to think about when you are making a statement. I think policy is good to be included, but I think if you just put out policy, I don't think it really gets deep enough, in my opinion.
Any other thoughts? Chris?
Yeah, I thought that we got a really good policy, and that's been getting better all the time, so a thumbs up on that. I would agree that maybe something in that first statement, about some, there's like ways in which you can take passive stances, which is making structure, and then active stances, which is like, okay, now we're gonna do something else. So, I don't know, we got that letter from Jay Collins, and I was thinking, like, well, maybe we could put something in there to illustrate that we are trying to integrate more diverse voices or diversity into the way in which we think about what we do.
Just if I can pause it just one
Can
second.
you not hear my
I
Where's
can
my
hear you,
mask?
but make sure you're speaking in your mic, first of all. And second, letter from Jay Collins, did that go to the entire board or just to you?
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
I think, I got it.
Well, then I'll
Make sure
remove
you're
that.
speaking in your mic, so.
I'll remove that, but I would say that we do have a diversity committee that maybe could be brought into the play a little bit more. And I thought that maybe when we think about how we're scheduling what our upcoming reports are on the system, it would be nice to get a report from the diversity committee. And maybe we can better articulate like how we're creating an active stance against, not just prohibiting against discrimination or racism, but really trying to take a stance of like anti-racism, to kind of a different sense, and figure out how we can kind of draw those voices in. I think it would be a great way to add to what we're already doing. So another thing we could do that we could discuss as a board, I think one thing that I'm realizing in this, historical state we're in is that I'm uneducated on race. I try really hard, but I don't have a deep enough understanding. That's something we could say as a district and as a board, that we were going to committed to getting our administrators and our staff and our board members the education that we need. I need it, you need it, we need it. So that's the way in which we can make up a statement that doesn't give us specific commitments, but that sets an agenda that we're going to address anti-racist education as a district going forward. So nothing that we're necessarily tied to, but in the kind of cultural moment we're in, I'm feeling really strongly about the fact that we need not just to, create a structure that mitigates against discrimination, but that we really need to take an anti-racist stance. And education, but that's what we're here for, seems to me to be a place where we get added to what we're doing. Nothing that changes curriculum, because that's Brian's world. But in terms of what we do for our staff education, and especially our board and administration education, that would be a nice way to say that we're going to actively take a stance against racism by giving anti-racist education. Something like that.
Other discussion? Jim?
One of the links that Amy, threw in there, I think it's the first one, it's from Education Week. And they have six suggestions that you include in a statement that would make it more, I guess, deep or whatever Amy was saying. So number one, acknowledge citizens across the country are protesting not only the death of George Floyd, but also police killings of many other unarmed Black people over time. Say how you personally feel about police officers killing unarmed Black people, and also say what you feel the way you do. Use words that explicitly mean racial violence. Call for readers of the statement to ask Black students, teachers, staff members, and families how they are affected by this. Urge readers of the statement to help students and colleagues across all racial and ethnic groups more deeply understand the realities of Black people interaction with law enforcement, locally and elsewhere, and articulate actions you plan to take to confirm that Black lives do indeed matter. Just some examples. So there, if you want to, there's some suggestions or direction on kind of a way to make a better statement.
Okay, so I've heard from Amy, Jim, and Chris, you'd all like to see the board go further on this statement. I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see the board do something similar to what Joe has drafted. It's, I would say more of a, stick to our policy type thing and explain where the district stands on it, all the work that we've done in the past. I guess it'd be interesting to hear some of the members that haven't spoken, where they stand, what they'd like to do.
Is this a diversity, is this a topic that has been discussed? I know it's the summer and the group doesn't meet, but where are they feeling on it? Would be one of my questions.
Well, diversity is very important in our school district, and anti-racism is too. In fact, one of our main professional development topics recently, we had Cornelius Minor, who's a well-respected speaker on anti-racism, and he came and presented to our entire staff. And I know that was very well received. But in terms of the diversity committee does not meet during the summer. So we have not had a meeting specific about the George Floyd situation. That's something I'm sure we'll discuss next fall when we're able to get back together. So I guess at this point, just kind of looking for direction from the board.
And actually, we haven't met since the COVID thing. Well, we haven't met since the COVID thing struck. I mean, it's been a long time since we've had a diversity committee meeting.
And
Just for clarification, the last email that I can find that was sent to the board from Mr. Collins was May 13th, thanking us for our Student Bill of Rights activities, which was appreciated. Was there another email sent out to other board members? Because if there was, it would be great if it could be shared with the rest of us to see what his thoughts are.
I'm looking for it right now. There we go. Okay, I thought it went to everybody. Hey, you all.
No, could you just please forward it on, because we're not gonna take action on it tonight, I'd like to have the opportunity to read it myself.
Yeah, I will. I'll forward it to Joe right now.
Charlie?
I guess, to Chris's point, I'm always eager to expand my horizons, so to learn more, as a board, I would be open to something like that. But I go back to connecting this to student achievement, and I really, that's a drum that I'm gonna beat often. I think that we need to think about that and look at that from if a lot of what's going on right now, exclusive of the George Floyd thing very specifically, is about how minorities are treated more generally than just that murder piece, if you will. And I think that we can do some things. Achievement in our district is not that good among non-whites. And I think there's some things that we could do there to look at, to think about, to change, to make that more of a priority. So I think to talk with Brian and Dr. Zadowski about that in the future, where does that rank in our strategic plan as an example? And, you know, where is it? Is it something that we're really thinking about? And I just think that if we make a statement, it says something, but it doesn't really do anything. And I think we should do something.
Clint, did you have something before? Amy?
I'm just gonna say, I noticed that River Falls, school district River Falls, actually had alumni, and they had over 1,000 alumni from their, write up a statement to the school district that said that they wanted more curriculum for their students and, so forth and so forth. And it was a really nice statement from the alumni. I haven't seen anything that comes through for Menomonie, but it talks exactly about what these people are talking about, maybe some education.
Curriculum as far as?
Racism and teaching history the proper way and not, trying to gloss over.
So Charlie, I'm gonna turn this back on you. Are you talking about, I think that maybe I'm making a disconnect and I wanna clarify. I think that if I understand correctly, what you're saying is you're looking at overall curriculum, math, language arts, not exclusively history and those types of things. You're looking at curriculum in the big picture, not just as far as a discrimination type of a mindset. Am I correct or am I wrong?
No, you are correct. I was thinking of it more from the point of view of minority students are less likely to be at grade level, less likely to be at proficient. And I think that needs to come up. And what are we doing to help those students?
We have the biggest, Wisconsin has the biggest gap between, I'm sorry. The state of Wisconsin has the biggest gap between minorities and white students as far as achievement is concerned. Maybe more so in the Milwaukee area, but still statewide.
Chris?
Yeah, so this is another thing that I know that we're all over our heads right now. Like we look at each other, like the people that are in the room, like effectively trying to think about how we transform curriculum to address a racial gap and a poverty gap that exists in the state. That's a real question. And so I think that we could start by, as a board, getting educated in terms of where these disparities come from, understanding how race operates and how anti-racism operates. And I think that I agree that trying to find a way to address that achievement gap is super important. But these are really hard conversations. And so thinking about how our first step should look, it really should be us and on us to get educated in terms of what the gaps are, or what other schools have done in terms of what modeling is, and to really make a statement that the first step in addressing how we make our first step is that we understand the question that's before us. So I think Charlie makes some really important points, and I think that, Penny backs that up. I mean, we gotta figure it out, and that's come up before about, some of our achievement gaps for our poor children, and then children of color as well. So taking that seriously, I think this is a great way to say that we wanna make an impact, not just make a statement. And the first step, I think, begins with us, in order to really figure out how we can make a task force, turn it over to admin, turn it over to the people that are working in our district, but we have to have a good agenda of what they're giving them. I remember before when I gave an agenda, it didn't work out well because it wasn't specific enough. And so if we're gonna touch this issue, which is hugely important, and Wisconsin is the new Mississippi. In terms of systemic racism, it is. Differences in terms of socioeconomic status, able to improve your condition, in terms of voter ID laws, across the board, we're the worst. I'm not saying Menomonie is the problem, but it should be upon us to really address that kind of reality. So I would really strongly support what Charlie is saying. That's a really great way of us thinking about how we can address this in a way that is not just making another statement. Statements are super important. I think Joe was.
I'm really glad you said that, Chris, about Menomonie not necessarily being in the state of Wisconsin. And that's not to say that we don't have work to do. I mean, certainly, I think we all agree that this is an important topic that we all think is really important in our school district. At the same time, I'm so proud of our educators and what our educators have done working with the community to make improvements in this area. And, you know, I think there's a lot of assumptions that have been made in the last 5 minutes about our school district. And if the board would like a report, I'm sure Brian could probably cite it off the top of his head, but I think if you want us to bring back a report and really identify where we're at in Menomonie in terms of some of the achievement levels, some of the attendance levels, I think there's, that would be a good place to start is, identifying where we're at. There has been a lot of great things from the choices of our curriculum to the choices of the books in the library, to how our teachers go about their instruction, that I am very proud of. That's not to say that we can't continue to do better, and we need to continue to do better, and we certainly will.
Is that something that the board would want for, I don't know, if next meeting too soon, Brian, or? I mean, put you on the spot, maybe you and Joe could work it out.
We can come up with a time frame.
2 to 4 weeks or
There's some information we could.
Charlie first, I believe.
I just want to say, don't misunderstand, I wasn't trying to denigrate what the good work that the teachers and the administration are doing. I think we can always do better. And looking at those scores, you can see that that's a gap, right? So we can always look to do better. And I think that's one of the gaps, at least, especially I should say, in light of what's going on, that I think could deserve some attention.
I'll make a point here, and that, I guess I didn't know what the intention was doing another statement when Amy came forward with this, but one of the things that I want to be very conscious of and concerned is if this George Floyd incident has taught us anything else, there are bad apples in every profession. So I don't want to demonize our teachers, I don't want to demonize our police or law enforcement. I think locally, we're very fortunate. We've got great men and women in blue that are serving our community through very challenging times. But I also think that we could always learn more about race. To me, I don't understand racism because part of what makes my day very interesting in my office is the diversity I have. And I know I could be more diverse than being in Menomonie, Wisconsin, but before I came here, not exaggerating, I had a Turkish couple in my office. I found it fascinating learning about their culture and stuff. So I think if it's done right and our kids are taught to have open minds, open hearts, I think you can be very powerful. So those are I guess that's my points.
Lenny?
It's really unfortunate, the things that have taken place politically very close to home for us. And the one thing that I would like to say personally is we need to focus on all students. That's our job of being here. This has opened our eyes, I think, a little bit more. We've always been aware, but I still don't want this to be a pigeonholed group of students because there are multiple students with multiple learning disabilities, economic backgrounds, diversity type issues. And I want to make sure that this doesn't just turn into a race related issue, and we still, it's our job to focus on every student, and hopefully this will make us focus a little bit more on achievement overall, because we've been focusing on so many other things for a while. I hope only good things can come from this. Not that great things aren't happening, but again, achievement, which Charlie focused on, and I think there are multiple different groups we need to be looking at, and all students in general. Where are our students lacking and needing some assistance across the board, not just one particular group?
Amy?
Just to piggyback on that, Penny, I guess I would like to ask you, have you ever been oppressed before?
Okay. Let's, I don't want to get into
Okay.
personal
Well,
stuff.
what I'd like to just say is that, and I'm not trying to be offensive in any way, I'm just trying to say that, for 400 years, these people have gone through this, okay, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And we've got to figure out a way to put a stop to it. And I'm not saying that we don't concentrate on these students. I would just like to see us be able to make them understand. I mean, if you're going down the hall and a racial slur comes up, in fact, somebody reported to me this week that a Menomonie high school student was here in Menomonie, was here in Menomonie, was just driving a truck, and some guys came by, chased him, called him racial slurs, traumatized him. So I guess I'm just concerned about those kinds of things.
Okay, I don't want this to escalate, but one more comment.
No, and it will be polite, and I don't underestimate that that's happening by any means. That was outside of our schools. I don't agree with it. I think it's terrible. I don't like it
Okay, good.
at all. I absolutely disagree with it. But our job as a school board is to address every student. And if our minority students are not being addressed the way that they should be, to the level that they should be, yes, we need to bump that up. But what does minority mean? Is it ethnic? Is it economic? Is it educationally? Is it learning based? We need to look at every student as a whole, and we'll set the tone for the district. I don't agree with what happened to that individual, and I think it's completely wrong, but our job is to help every student, not just one group of students as well.
Okay, the focus on the discussion item started with a statement related to discrimination and racism in the SDMA. We've gone off on a couple different things here, so let's try to bring it back to that. Chris?
Yeah, can we get together a group just to make a statement that brings together some ideas we talked about here? Because sometimes our discussions are great, but sometimes they can get, it's gonna be uncomfortable this one, for sure. So maybe getting together like a shared set of values, I know we can do this. Getting together some people maybe from opposite perspectives to come together to come with a shared set of values about how we're trying to address this. And as Penny says, it is about every student. And this is the deal, like race, when you educate kids about race, you help every student. That helps every student. That helps us. It helps the district, it helps the community, it helps the town. So this is something that affects all the students, and it really affects the way in which that they're able to really move off into a world that really is gonna hopefully leave some of our mistakes behind. So maybe Tanya, you wrote a really nice letter to go up to the point, super direct. Would you like to maybe try to work together and make a set of shared values about school board, statement on George Floyd, Breonna Taylor,
I'm gonna
and
think
how
about
it
it.
relates to us?
Right now, no, I don't want to commit, but no, I.
So,
I volunteer.
Okay, so we have a document before us right now. Let's talk about that. If you want changes made to it, let's go from there to start. We started off, Jim and Amy, you guys had comments about things that you talked about. I'd be curious on the rest of the board. Because in my mind, this is, I just think that when we stick to policy and talk about where the Monmouth School District stands, I think it's very clear. We have some great policies, and it's pretty clear when we talk about things that way.
I think Dave, you're saying the statement is below, right? Starting with in light and then ends with in red. Is that what you're saying, or was there an attachment that I missed?
No, it's in the narrative.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. I
In
just wanna
light
make sure.
of, and it ends with,
Yes. Inclusive
responsibility of
and-
everyone in our community to ensure that our children are provided a safe and inclusive
Okay,
environment.
super. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something. Okay.
That is the statement.
Yep.
And Amy had a couple of things that she has to be included, a few different things.
Okay, well, one thing I'd like to see is, something to do with Black Lives Matter in there, just because I think it talks about that. I'm not saying that, no, people say all lives matter, but you have to go back to the 400 years of, blatant racism against them. And I just think we need to make our students understand that they matter, their lives matter to us.
Any thoughts, any board members? Chris?
I think we can make these, that we get out, there's a long list of things that other districts have done that maybe are a little bit tangential. I like the fact that we want to reinforce what we're already doing. They already have strong policies. And I think the thing that is most important is that we come up with something new. Because the deal about systemic racism is that you can't see it. You know what I mean? It's the thing that you're trying to fight all the time. So something that's an active stance that gives you specific things that you're going to do or going to accomplish to help address the systemic racism that exists in our district, I think would be the way to go. And I think I suggested that we want to reach out and give a stronger hand to the diversity committee, maybe a task force with Brian, looking at it in our curriculum. And then think about how we can make some specific goals for education opportunities for admin, staff, and students. Really easy statement that says we're taking it seriously and we're going to try and take the right types of active stances that can address what systemic racism is, which is the way in which that race exists within institutional structures that is invisible to people on a daily basis.
You say easy statement, Chris, but there's a lot of work involved in the statement you just said. When you talk about curriculum changes and things like that, it's a pretty big thing. Not that we can't do stuff, but I think we have to be. I like being clear with what we say and being able to follow through with what we say we're going to do. So, sure.
I don't think that, if I'm understanding Chris correctly, that if we're gonna write a statement in the next month or whatever, I don't think that specific curriculum changes should be included in that statement. That needs research, that needs to be really thought out and bring people in. I think, I don't think that statement should go there in my mind. It's much too, the curriculum piece is a long-term thing. We're not gonna change it in the next 3 weeks or a month. I think that's something that these two gentlemen need to look at and think about and research and come back to look at what we're doing. And I'm not just thinking about curriculum in that word either. Why are those kids not achieving? Is it curriculum or is it something else? Is it something that the school district has no control over, or is it something that the school district tangentially has some control over and could do something? I don't think that belongs in a statement. That's just my opinion. I don't think you can do that work that quickly.
I 100% agree. I'm sorry if I wasn't.
Mike, please.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I said that we were going to make a task force to look into curriculum. So very clear that we're going to set up agendas that Joe is going to be in charge of that start looking at how we can improve what we're doing. And I think we thought of 3 things. One was a task force on curriculum. Another one was looking at education piece for people that work within the district. Another one was trying to find a way in which we can have the diversity committee take more active stance in setting agendas for how we look at race in the curriculum. So those things you can just make in actually one sentence by empowering the existing structures we have to make an active assessment of where we're at to make improvements going forward. And then you can say, by the way, look at these awesome policies. Menomonie stands against racism and discrimination. John.
To be fair, Chris, I want this to be a whole board decision, not a couple people. So I want everybody's viewpoint on how we move forward on this. Good.
Just a quick question, it's probably for Joe or Brian, not to put them on the spot, but where are we falling short? What are we missing? I mean, I know this has definitely been brought more to light, but are we effectively measuring what we're doing to prevent and combat racism in our schools? And how do we measure that?
Well, that's a good question, Clinton. It would take time for us to develop a report. I mean, certainly we have the assessment scores that we can look at. We have some attendance data we can look at. We have some disciplinary data we can look at, but that's not something we can cite moment's notice.
I mean, it's really hard to measure the systemic racism part. I mean, we can look at evaluation, performance, education gaps, but how do you measure that invisible racism that, like Chris is referring to? I don't expect an answer, Joe, I don't know.
Well, that's a lot of the work that the diversity committee has done over the past couple of years, and that we'll continue to do. You know, the training of our teachers, the improvements we've made to our disciplinary systems and reporting measures and board policies, frankly. I think the Student Bill of Rights fits into some of this. I think there's a lot of work being done. So to this statement then, oh, sorry, Dave.
Go ahead, Tim.
To this statement then, I mean, I fully appreciate that the board may want to modify it. You know, this is a committee of the whole meeting, and I would caution the board to continue to use these splintered committees. That's what the purpose of the committee of the whole is, for the whole board to work together. Now is an appropriate time to develop the statement. So if the board wants a statement, I mean, I can put something out on my own, but you can see how challenging that is, you know, even when we have the board together here, there's a pretty confusing conversation going on, I guess, in terms of trying to pick out what it is that the board as a whole would like to say. And as a district administrator, I mean, I can share my personal feelings about it. I think it's terrible, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed. But if you want me to do that, that's fine. But I try to take the policies, which is the way the board speaks, and share those policies while condemning the action.
Amy?
I'm not against the policies at all. I think they need to be part of it. I have no problem with that. I just think it needs to go a little bit deeper. Also, I would love to see those, that data, you know, and whatever timeframe it takes to do that. I think that would be really important for us to see. I was looking at the cross one pretty carefully, and there is a spot in there that talks about, and I just lost it, but it was something in here about how they understand that the board cannot dictate curriculum. That's up to the school district. You know, that would be micromanaging. I understand that completely. And it does say that in here, but it does say that they're going to try to do their best to support their teachers and so forth. And then, you know, against any of, you know, these things. And then it also talks about, let's see. It does say, however, one of the most important responsibilities we have as a school board is establishing work policies for the district and ensuring these policies are carried out with fidelity. And here's the thing I was trying to get at. For example, the governance structure of our school board does not give board members authority to directly intervene in personnel or curricular matters. And I'm proud of our teachers too. I think they do a great job, especially this last couple of months. Anyhow, it just goes on and talks about their statistics in lacrosse and, you know, what they're trying to do to try to help them understand, you know, that they understand that this is a problem and they want to work on it.
Chris?
It might be, I'm so sorry. It might be really helpful if we just do two statements, like Joe does his statement, but just add some active language to the first part. I think it's really important that our students of color, that we respond to them. They need to hear that we respond to them in a way that's meaningful, not just that it's like, oh, we have these policies already, but I mean, I think what this cultural moment is that people need a little bit of empathy. And so empathy and an empathetic response is part of humanizing the situation. And so when we think about what we do going forward, Joe makes a very specific statement about what we've done and some things that he wants to do for an agenda going forward. For us, we have to really look at each other and realize that we are uneducated on this subject. We need to do some work. And when Penny talks about taking care of all the kids in our district, that's true, but we've got some blinders on. And so we can make a more proactive statement about what we're going to do to address our own ignorance and to create a structure on the board that really draws in the type of data that you need. And one thing that we're starting to realize in systemic racism is that it's hidden. And they need the stories of the people that experience it. It's a qualitative type of analysis. And so I would say to a lot of our kids that scout at these rallies, and their stories they're heartbreaking. I mean, it's here. I mean, we don't see it. But they feel it every day. So figure out ways in which they can think about how we address the problem in ways that addresses their own lack of knowledge and understanding. I think that would be a very profound statement for this board say that we're gonna take very specific steps to get educated so that we can make better policies that can address the problem that we've outlined to. I mean, all of us. I mean, none of us in this board have been actively trying to address the problems of racism in our community. You know what I mean? Like I haven't, I teach race, you know what I mean? But my students of color are like, you're white-splaining. You know, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm starting to get that. Learning language like, you know, white fragility, not being able to hear criticism. The way in which we think about microaggressions. I'm realizing there's a whole host of ways of me that I can think about what I do as an educator that has meaning. That's only come from this moment. And so I think we could all benefit with a good dose of self-education, so we can figure out how we can make better policy that really helps all of our students by addressing a problem that lives here, but that most of us are blind to. So 2 statements, one from Joe and one for the board. Both of them have some sort of empathetic information, and both of them have specific steps we're gonna do to address the way in which it's here, that we just need to bring it to the surface in a little more proactive way.
Okay, personally, I think we need to speak with one voice. Penny?
I was just going to echo, I think if we're gonna do a statement, we do one statement. May I suggest, because I think we could sit here and probably talk about this all night, for sure. Going about it the way we've done in the past with statements, where Dave sets up a time frame and everybody can kind of send in their thoughts and their little pieces they want. We bring it all together and wrap it up in one thought and bring it back to the next meeting to reevaluate and take a look at it. Instead of having a committee, instead of having a group, everybody can throw out their ideas based on the information that Amy brought that's incredibly helpful, based on the policy that Joe has brought forward. Excuse me. And, sorry, excuse me. And bring it all together as one thought, because we all have different things that we're thinking right now. I think they're all very good, and it can be brought together as one cohesive message from the district.
I personally think that's a great idea.
I do too. I
Amy?
just want to say, I think that's a great idea, and thank you for suggesting it. The first thing is if Joe wanted to write a message, and I'm not saying you have to, Joe, that's not my intention, but there is a really nice letter that Randy Nelson wrote that's in that link about what he said about, you know, the superintendent of schools, he wants to stand and support every Black child and so forth. So that's something that, you know, you might want to take a look at. I'm not saying you have to do that, but that could be part of our statement too. So that's all, thank you.
Okay, I guess, we've talked about a lot. How about you guys email your suggestions? Like Friday? To Joe, please. And,
Timeline? You say by when? You say by Friday?
Does that work? Is that enough time for you?
Yeah.
Email me by Friday, and I can put it together and share it with Dave, and then, yeah, maybe copy Dave also. Email me, copy Dave.
I had a quick question. Have you put anything together in the school crossings column you regarding this at all?
No.
Maybe a spot, cool.
when do those,
Well, with the newspaper changing quite a bit, but I can write one pretty much anytime and submit one.
Not that I'm looking for Dr. Joe's opinion on racism and whatever else, but I think that'd be a good place for that link that Amy was talking about.
Sure.
It's right on their website, but you know, you can still, you know, just get a website or whatever, if you wanted to, but I'm not talking.
I'd be happy to, I just don't want to overstep my bounds, especially knowing that there's, you know, I figured there'd be some difficulty coming together with 9 voices, and this is helpful, it's given me some information, and I work for this board.
anything else for you?
Do we need to make any sort of a formal action, motion, whatever, to move this to to a discussion item for the next board meeting?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We'll just,
Just
get you.
request it.
Okay, no, there we go. I think we're all in agreement, hopefully, that we requested.
Any disagreement, put it that way. Okay, Jim?
I just would ask that whatever we send, you put it in one of your Google Doc thingies, so we can throw it out there on our things and revise it if we need to. We just expedite that process rather than having it in board docs. Or, you know.
Okay? Thank you, everybody. Very good discussion. Okay, we'll move on to item B, COVID-19 report.
Okay, it's gonna take me just a second to switch gears here. No,
I'm supposed to talk slower. I can talk about the fish.
I'm ready, thanks.
Were you using your name?
So there's actually a lot of really good news in Dunn County right now. I mean, the pandemic it's hard to say good news and then talk about a pandemic, but right now we're at 29 confirmed cases, 26 of which have been released from isolation. I've had the opportunity to talk to KT Gallagher. She's the director of the Dunn County Health Services Department a number of times since the last school board meeting. And she's been very supportive, very caring about our community and trying to keep as many people healthy and safe as possible. In terms of our state, the news isn't quite as good, but Wisconsin still is looking pretty decent. 3 of 6 indicators are hit on the feeding criteria for the Badger Bounce Back Plan. And in fact, in Dunn County, KT Gallagher shared that today, the guidance is going to be increased from having only 10 people allowed in an indoor social gathering to 25 people. And then outdoor gatherings, that threshold will be increased to 50. So my question for KT was, well, when you look at our numbers and you compare it to Eau Claire, for instance, Eau Claire had a lot of press on their guidance for gatherings, and I think theirs was 50 and 100 maybe, if I remember right. So I asked her, so well, if our county's performing so much better, why are our numbers lower in terms of what that threshold is? And her response really turned a light on for me. When she talked about the size of her staff compared to the size of the staff in Eau Claire County, I think it was close to like half. I don't know the exact numbers. And when we talk about the size of gatherings, the purpose of that really is for the contact tracing. I mean, it's to keep people healthy and safe, but in the event that there is an exposure or a case, it's critically important that they're able to do contact tracing and try to get that person to isolation and potentially any people that they had contact with during that time of exposure, so that those people can be in isolation and try to cut this off as quick as they can. So it's not so much when you compare the thresholds Eau Claire County and Dunn County, it's not that Dunn County isn't doing great, Dunn County is doing great, but it's really the size of that department and their ability to contact trace. It sounds like our health department has received some approval for some federal grant money. I believe that she's going to be hiring at least one more contact tracer. And I think the hope is that soon the threshold for those gathering sizes will be increased even more. Regardless of that, however, it's important as ever, because the virus is still here, it hasn't changed. It's super important to continue to monitor symptoms. It's super important to wash hands. Still very important to maintain social distancing, that 6-foot threshold as much as possible. KT Gallagher cited some white papers she's read and some of the studies on how people are contracting the disease. Maintaining that 6 feet has had a real significant positive impact on stopping the transmission. So that's really important. We talked a lot about wearing face coverings. I know that's an issue, and she certainly encourages wearing face coverings. But the deal there is, especially if you're not able to maintain that 6 feet social distancing. If a lot of people are like me, when you talk, your screen ends up getting a little wet, whether you try to or not. That's where that face covering really comes into play. So, I mean, I appreciate, some people have decided to wear face coverings even when there is social distancing available. That's protecting everybody else in the room. The face coverings aren't necessarily protecting the individual wearing them. It's protecting everyone else from those secretions. So then when we get talking more specifically about Menomonie and our school district, you all know that the 2019-2020 school year ended on June 4th. Again, I can't say enough how proud I am of our students and staff for how they handled the closure. Starting on March 13th, 1 week of spring break, and then from there till June 4th, it was remote learning. And we surveyed our students, we've surveyed our families, we've surveyed our staff. And the results of the surveys came back very good. And there was a lot of positive compliments, a lot of things that people were very pleased with. There were also some ideas. There were also some areas that said, hey, if we have to do this again in the fall, here's how we can make this better. And that was very, very helpful. I know Brian's been digging into the data more than anybody, and we've already began to generate some ideas and some plans based on the feedback we've received. In terms of graduation, we did have the graduate parade on May 31st. Thank you to the parents and everyone. We talked about that at the last board meeting. That was really nice. And then the virtual graduation ceremony that was broadcast on Friday night, I mentioned that earlier. Very, very pleased with the effort put into that. We have a diploma presentation scheduled to be held on July 17th. The format of that presentation is somewhat up in the air a little bit. We are going to have to make some decisions pretty quick. It'd be nice to wait until like the day before, and maybe Dunn County will increase it even more, but it's not something you can't throw that together in a matter of a day. So I know Mr. Drake's going to be making some decisions. I do believe there will be a face-to-face opportunity for families to come into the school to receive a diploma. I certainly don't think there will be a full gym. I just don't think that's possible. But we're going to do everything we can to make it a very nice ceremony and a very nice opportunity for families. Our personal property pickup and Chromebook collection started out very slow, but it picked up greatly. And we appreciate the attention that families gave to that. We still have some Chromebooks, and we still have some other materials that we're still collecting. In fact, I was walking out of here to get something to eat for lunch quick, and one of the high school students said, "Oh, Mr. Z, here." So I grabbed the Chromebook bag, and we got another one back today. So again, if anybody has those items, it's very important to get those back. Summer school, the virtual summer school began today. There were a few hiccups with a couple of the classes in terms of the virtual piece, but I think it all got squared away and sorted out. So we have a large number of kids that are participating in virtual summer school. We're very happy about that. And we're still hoping to have some in-person summer school in August, but planning has not started on that yet. The free meals for kids program, that's going to continue. And when we talked last time, one of the board members mentioned about the idea of trying to get it all the way through August. And talking to Michelle, she was able to do that. So now the program's going to run all the way through August 27th. There are a few changes to the program that will begin July 2nd, actually. The meals will be available for pickup only at 2 locations, and that has to do with how the program is funded and in certain areas that it needs to serve. Those pickup locations will be at the high school and middle school only. Everyone's still eligible for it, and we're asking that people who are picking up meals at Wakanda please make arrangements to pick it up at the high school. We just have a much larger facility there where we can house more food and more bags, and it'll be a Thursday afternoon pickup instead of Friday right at noon. So here's the fun part. This is the part that I've really enjoyed the past week. It's actually some real positive stuff, talking about plans for reopening the SDMA. And it's pretty scary, when you think about reopening and you think about trying to keep everyone as safe as possible. Because again, this virus isn't just going away. We wish it would, but it's still going to be there. So that's what my colleagues and I and the Department of Health Services continue to talk about. How can we offer the safe, a very safe environment, but also provide the services that people rely on us for. So when we talk about discretionary mitigation efforts, they're meant to help reduce risk, but the effectiveness of all this will still greatly be impacted by the decisions and actions made by each student, staff member, and family. So phase 1 is where we're getting too closely. And in July 1st, we're hoping to do a phase 1 opening, which would include the offices and facilities in our school district would be open to the public for essential functions and approved activities with restrictions. Many of our employees are still working remotely as much as possible. Starting July 1st, we feel that we can bring our employees back in on a full-time basis. There may be some situations where accommodations would be necessary, and we certainly would provide those. But we plan to have our offices fully staffed on July 1st. We will have a plan approval process by the district for any group activity held in district facilities. I can't believe how excited people have gotten. I mean, my Twitter account, I got one again. I don't know if you follow that at all. I got one again just yesterday about the tennis course at the high school. I know we've had parents call about wanting to get into the pool and their children want to start training for the fall seasons. Also the gym and weight room. We've had requests from the Ludington Guard Band to hold concerts in the parking lot at the high school, community education offerings, and the Boys and Girls Club programming. It's gonna be a lot of work though, because we can't just put out a blanket policy and say, okay, here are the 5 things you need to do, because each event is so specific. And that's one thing that KT Gallagher talked about, was it's important that we look at those events and how those events are gonna be run, and then do everything we can to try to mitigate potential exposure and spread. Some of the restrictions that all the groups can expect though is we will not allow groups to exceed the maximum number thresholds suggested by the Dunn County Department of Health Services. So if it's an outdoor gathering, right now it's 50 and indoors 25. Now, that doesn't mean 25 people in the entire high school. It means 25 people per gathering. So it is possible that a gathering could be held in the gymnasium, another gathering could be held in the weight room, another gathering could be held in the commons, as long as mitigation measures are taken to keep all those gatherings totally separate. We do want to make sure that we do our part in helping with the contact tracing, especially after hearing about that challenge here in Dunn County. So any activity we would have strict attendance records required for all visitors entering and using our facilities. There would be no admittance to district facilities for people with any recent potential exposure to someone with COVID-19 or any existing symptoms of COVID-19. And I think most people understand that, but we would post those symptoms and those expectations at our facilities to make it very, very clear. We already have the hand washing or sanitizing expectation. You see it when you walk into the ASC here. We have a table with the hand sanitizer. We would continue to have that expectation. And then face coverings or other mitigation techniques required when social distancing cannot be fully achieved. Most times we would mitigate the activity by requiring the activity to have social distancing in place. We understand there may be some times when it just can't keep that 6-foot distance, but if that's the case, we want to do the best we can through other mitigating efforts. Anything to do with our students, we will have permission slips filled out. It's not so much a waiver of liability. We've been advised that really is, somewhat problematic and somewhat of a waste of time. However, my concern as a district administrator is that if a parent is going to trust us and have their child in our facility, whether it be to lift weights or play an instrument or do something like that, I want to make sure that parents are informed of the mitigation efforts we're making. And if they're comfortable with that and they want to sign off and give their child permission, fine. If they don't feel that that's appropriate for their child, then I don't think that child should be participating in that activity, especially during this phase 1 opening. All guidance and approvals will be subject to change based on guidance from the Department of Health Services. KT Gallagher, again, has been great to work with. She told me her intention is really not to shut activities down. Her intention is to work together and mitigate the best that we can. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is planning for next school year. We do have a planning team that's been established. It has at least 1 staff representative from each building level. We have a meeting coming up this Wednesday. We have 3 other meetings scheduled in July, and then more meetings will be scheduled as needed. We are expecting more guidance from the Department of Public Instruction on coming back to school. That guidance is expected to come out on June 22nd. I'm sure that'll be very informative. Some of the preliminary stuff has been very well aligned with some of our previous discussions about having multiple options looking at the fall. In-person learning, virtual learning, and a blended option. We talked at our last meeting about, even if we are fully open, we know there's going to be families that it just doesn't fit with their family structure or the needs of their family to send their child to school in an environment where COVID, it's not as safe as being at home. So we want to make sure that we have that remote option available, even if buildings are fully open.
Joe, can I ask you a question?
You bet.
So when DPI does share guidance, do they do it based on our demographics versus other parts of the state, or it's all? So
It'll be statewide. I'm not expecting requirements though, Tanya. I'm expecting guidance.
So I have a question. So if there's students that are home with remote instruction only, will that, the curriculum that they receive be at the same level as students that are attending school then?
That's part of the planning we need to do, Dave. Right now, and I need to talk to our teachers. Right now, when we map out some possibilities, when we look 6th through 12th grade, we already use Wisconsin Virtual School for offering some virtual education, and those courses are rigorous. When we look K-5, there are virtual options that we could purchase into. However, when I look at our curriculum, K-5, and I look at the benchmarks our teachers try to achieve, in order to have what you just talked about, have a similar learning experience, I would be more inclined to set up something in-house K-5. But a lot of that's going to depend on how many students we're talking about and what our teachers think is best. So we'll have more answers to that question next time.
Thank you.
So then lastly, I just want to tell you what we've been doing in the meantime in preparation for phase 2. We have ordered additional computers. It went pretty well this year. We ended up having enough for every student who needed one. We did rely on families to provide devices when they could. We want to make sure we have enough computers, so we are ordering additional Chromebooks. We're also going to order additional hotspots. I think Katie actually already put that order in. We're not going to be able to have a hotspot for every student, but we do feel that we'll have a number of more hotspots so that more students will be able to have internet access if where they live supports that. Right now, we're concentrating a lot on PPE, personal protective equipment. We know we're going to need face coverings. We know we're going to need protective shields. We know we're going to need a lot of hand sanitizer. Some of the challenges being able to get all that. When the pandemic first broke out, that's one thing Kevin, we talked right away, and he was able to get some orders in, and we were able to stock up in some of those areas. So we feel really good about where we're starting this school year, but we want to make sure we have enough cleaning supplies and everything, disinfectants that we will need. And then also, when we look at some high-risk areas like the weight room, for instance, there are some disinfecting techniques being considered for those higher risk areas. Phase 3 is post-pandemic at this point, so everything there is to be determined. Right now, our focus is on phase 1 and phase 2. Certainly, I hope phase 3 is here by Christmas, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Amy?
I have a question. When it comes to the students that just choose maybe to stay home and maybe do online enrollment or that kind of thing or so forth, and I'm guessing this isn't gonna happen, but I would just be really careful. I would not like to see those families and those kids penalized just because they decide that they feel more safer at home.
Yeah, I agree. Did I say something that made you feel like you
No,
were penalized?
I just was just asking because I just wanna make sure, that everybody's, on the same page there.
Okay. Chris?
I've been getting more articles being sent to me about athletics. I've been getting more articles sent to me about the problems, even conceiving of social distancing in athletics. So what's the Department of Education, what are the guidelines being sent out about that? Because that's like an impossible situation, trying to mediate distancing in the locker room plus in a team sport atmosphere. Like, are we having realistic discussions about that not being possible in the fall, which would be hard to even think about for Menomonie, you know what I mean? What the fall looks like.
It's a real legitimate concern. And when we talk about phase 1, we're not talking about those kinds of team scrimmages or those types of situations where you have a large group of students exposing each other. The WIA they said there was going to be some guidance coming out. It has not come out yet. We expected it last week. I would anticipate though that there will be some sort of fall sports season unless the pandemic worsens, and that certainly is a possibility.
I think about the same thing even with like band or orchestra or something like that. Chris, that's not gonna work. It might change the production that even the theater puts on too. I mean, it's gonna have to be something smaller and distancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're just thinking like, because my situation, I really can't be doing any coaching, but the kids are like, are you coaching? What's our team gonna be doing? Like, it's hard to even imagine. I know, right? Because like you coach, it's impossible to imagine how you even communicate with your players when you're coming in to think about strategizing, especially when you're on the field, like all that is really disconcerting when you think about what the reality is, so.
Well, and that's where the whole mitigation strategy comes into play. It is not gonna be possible to social distance and play basketball or play football or play soccer. I mean, that you can't social distance. So then you need to look at what other mitigation strategies can you use? You know, can you group people together? Are there ways to go about it where, you know, you may have, you know, potential exposure, but in small groups, so that it'd be contact traced quickly. In terms of interscholastic and playing other schools, I think that's a whole other issue. So yeah, there's a lot of things that'll need to be sorted out. But, you know, the nice thing is when you look at, you know, the pro sports, when you look at the college sports, there are some models that are coming out, but high school's not gonna be able to do what they're doing. You know, I think when they report to camp, you know, the first thing they do is test every athlete. And I think there's multiple testing going on. And, you know, we're just not set up to do that right now. And if that's the case in the fall, where the testing isn't set up or, you know, mitigation strategies can't be effective in terms of really reducing the risk, then yeah, there's probably not going to be competitive athletics. But whether or not there's competitive athletics, I still think many of these activities are gonna be very healthy for our kids. And I worry about the isolation piece too. You know, when we look at, you know, when Amy talked about, you know, having people penalized for deciding to stay home, you know, certainly the school district's gonna do everything we can to make that a good environment. But it's awfully hard to replicate all those relationships and all those experiences that those kids miss out on. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to put a plan together that'll be good for as many people as possible.
I do. I thought UW system-wide is planning on going back, right, in the fall, and they released that, so. If you, any of the work at the university, is there anything on sports from a university standpoint, what they might be doing?
I can tell you that, it's kind of weird, UW system came out with some guidelines, but before that, they were kind of a day short and a dollar short, because every university's already been working on this way before the UW system ever came without anything. But as far as I know, in River Falls, they're gonna just piecemeal us back in, and those that can stay home and stay remotely will do so, probably through all next year, possibly. But they're gonna start, I think, after July 1st, starting to do that. We will all be required to wear masks. We will provide them to all the students too, for all students and all staff. And when you're in common areas where you can't distance. In your office, or when you're eating, obviously, you can't have your mask off. Your own office, but then, like I said, you know, that's one of the things they're gonna require. Also, they're thinking that, you know, with the dorms, it's highly possible that, they may have to, limit the amount of people that are in the dormers because of the closeness. I mean, there's like 30 people that share a bathroom. So that could be, you know, a real issue, so I don't know how they're gonna handle that, that's being discussed. Also, they have to figure out a place to isolate people, like, for instance, you know, if students come on and somebody gets COVID or gets diagnosed, well, then they have to find a place to put them, so are they gonna keep having a residence hall that's strictly for, you know, quarantine, and for roommates and, you know, whatever that's exposed. The other thing is, I would have to fill out a form every single day, I take my temperature and do a bunch of other stuff. Every day, a form I have to fill out and send it in before I can even leave the house to go to work. And then they check it out and see, you know, and then obviously if you have a fever or if you're feeling bad, of course you stay home. And it's, you know, get the sanitizer and cleaning and all of that too, so that's kind of what they're planning at this point.
Thank you. I know my daughter, through med school at Madison, they started back up the 1st of June, and it's been going for more than that, so. Clint?
Amy, do you know, at River Falls, are they gonna implement like a tracking app? I know UW Eau Claire said yesterday that they're gonna implement a tracking app, and that's how you enter your temperature in there. And then the other advantage that would be is if you came in contact with other infected people, they could identify.
I'm sure there's gotta be some way they're gonna track. Have you looked into that yet? My guess is that there has to be some tracing to find out, you know, how they got exposed.
Yes. Any other questions for Joe on the COVID report? Okay. Move on. Sam, annual HR report.
I asked Sam to go ahead and come up to Trish's spot there so she can use the microphone and Steve can get a good shot.
You want me to sit or would it be awkward if I stood? All right, turn that on.
So I included this report with the documents that were shared with you on Thursday, so hopefully you had an opportunity to look this over. And if you have any questions, we can get to those. I'm just gonna kind of highlight a couple of things. And then like I said, at the end, if you have any questions, that'd be great. Just looking at the first few items on the top here, looking at almost 50% of our regular staff have been with us for 5 years or less. So we have a fairly new staff, and this does include teachers and all support staff. And so we do know that some of the positions that we have are a little bit more high turnover. And so that sometimes that factors in with our kind of our current data. Looking at our substitute staffing, you can see that we're pretty consistent, slightly up from last year with regard to current active substitutes. And then also down a little bit more with our active supports staff.
Just, your report has vanished from my
Oh.
thing. I don't know why it's not there.
Time's up. Anybody else?
We put it up, it's just gone. It's just mine.
Try refreshing once, Jim, see if it comes back. Anybody else have that issue?
Let's see.
Maybe you could look at Amy's. Good thing you guys were married.
Okay, here we go. It's back. Okay, sorry.
And one of the things too, I'm just gonna jump back up to the top real quickly. Out of our 244 teachers and specialists, you can see that 65% of them have obtained a master's degree. And I think that's something that is important to recognize, that that's something that we value a lot within the district. We supported a cohort a couple of years ago, and that for our teachers, and we had, I believe it was roughly 30 people that were able to obtain a master's degree through that program. And I know Brian has been working with Stout and potentially some other districts to develop another cohort. That was a really great opportunity for a lot of our staff. Again, looking at going down then again to that substitute staffing, you can kind of see those numbers are similar. So any questions about the data right there in front of us?
Amy?
Just your substitute, it seems like it's kind of roller coaster there. And it seems like, we're a little higher on the current active substitute teachers and then a little lower on the support staff. Is there any reason why you think that's happening?
I think there's probably a lot of reasons why that's happening. I think just in general, we're seeing smaller teaching pools, and I believe many years ago, we would have a lot of those maybe teachers, newly graduated teachers that weren't able to obtain a teaching position, and so they were a major part of our sub pool. I think we also have some teachers that maybe are staying a little bit beyond their retirement years, and so they would typically also be part of our pool, and they're still currently teaching. It's, the job market is tight right now. People are looking for jobs, and the job market is, I should say, pretty good right now that people are able to obtain more full-time positions. So I think there are a lot of reasons. I think what we have done, what the board has done and supported with regard to increasing our pay and giving some of the incentives has really helped with getting our pool, boosting our pool numbers. So.
If I could jump in for a second though, I am very concerned about subbing for the fall. I think it's gonna be extremely difficult to find substitute teachers, especially with a portion of our substitute teachers being retired and potentially not wanting to put themselves in a situation where the risk would be higher to contract COVID-19 compared to staying at home. So I think it was challenging the last couple of years. I think Sam and our principals did a great job getting us to where we are. And you can see it's still quite a bit down from 2017, 2018. But I think it's really good. I think when you look at this report next year, it's gonna be pretty rough.
How do our numbers compare, say, to like Eau Claire or Colfax or Whitesville in terms of subs and percentages and drops and stuff like
that?
I haven't compared like number to number teachers and support staff. I do know, I meet bi-weekly right now with the HR directors in the Big Rivers Conference. And we have been meeting quarterly for the last couple of years since I've been in this role. And this is something that comes up frequently, that all districts are struggling right now with trying to get enough substitutes. And in fact, we share a lot of our subs with Boyceville, with Elk Mound, with Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls. And so there's, those people are being pulled in multiple directions, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get our sub rates filled, our sub percentages filled. So it's an ongoing issue, I think, across the board. Just looking at, I'll move on to the next page, existing staff statistics. So you can see we've done a 5-year look back. Teachers, paras, custodial, clerical, food service coordinators and directors, executive assistants, administrators, and then educational support as well. And you can kind of see the resigned versus retired. I looked at, some of the, and you can kind of see we're consistent with last year with teachers who, let's say, have resigned. Looked at some of the reasons. We do an exit survey we send it out to all of our exiting staff, support staff, teachers, and administrators. And so far from kind of the end of this year, so within the last couple of weeks, we've gotten 12 responses from people. Most are staying, and I know the situations that all of these people, I talk with them quite frequently and know about their resignations or retirements. One's staying home with a baby, one's entering a counseling program to become a school counselor. One is kind of a pseudo-retirement, so someone who came to us after kind of a career in a different district and then is finishing up with us here. 7 or I should say 6 are moving to another district, and 1 is looking at a career change, and then 1 is moving out of state. So those are kind of the reasons that people are leaving. They have an opportunity to share with us the things that they really liked about the district, the things that they would change, any suggestions. They also have an opportunity to share with us the people that have been most influential while they were in the district. So it's really nice to read through those comments and see some of our shining stars, people who have really helped along the way. So, just moving on to some additional information. One of the things that I worked on quite a bit this year was the implementation of a pre-employment physical program, and the board voted on that, or it was able to look at that, and then we were able to move forward and implement that. We started that on January 1st. In lieu of having just TB tests done, we are now having all of our staff complete a pre-employment physical with mail, and it's going incredibly smoothly. I honestly could not ask for a better system working with them. We have our new employees call a phone number. They set up an appointment, often within a day or two of getting that phone number. The results are emailed to us within the same day that they have the employment physical done. And it is actually a lot quicker than having the TB test done, because you have to go set up an appointment, and especially now with public health being overwhelmed the way that they are, they're not able to do the TB test. So for whatever reason, we were very lucky to get started with this prior to COVID coming in, because I think we would have been backpedaling a little bit, and I'm really glad that this is something that's in place at this point. So that's been something that's been a really nice addition to the district as well. Some of the other things, moving on to the substitute report, I do include this. I think I have included this the last couple of years, or at least last year. So during the previous school district, the school year, 2018-19, we piloted the submodel that is currently in place at the high school right now. And it went well. We certainly did experience, some hiccups, but with a new plan and the big change that it was for a lot of our students and staff, we addressed some of the questions and concerns that people had, and I think that moving forward, things have really smoothed out and have been, it's been a nice addition. We've hired a retired teacher to be our supervisory aide. We did have 2 different people in that position, but when one resigned, the other said that she'd be willing to take over. So having that consistency has been really nice for students and for staff. They all know what to expect. when we have large numbers in the tiered lecture hall, we're able to utilize spaces like the library and the commons area. And I think it has definitely helped with our substitute fill rate, because the subs that would typically be used at the high school are now picking up our jobs at the middle school and elementary building. So, again, talked about the wages in there and the some of the incentives that we've offered to our subs, and I've heard from a lot of our subs that they're very appreciative of those things. So the rest is very similar to some of the things that I've reported previously, and then you can kind of see the substitute data breakdown on the last page over the last 3 years. So.
So with this tiered lecture hall and large number of students in there, how are you gonna deal with that and the COVID safeguards?
Yeah, we've already talked about that a little bit. Utilizing different spaces will probably be one thing. The commons is a really large area. Also the mezzanine in the gym. Sometimes classes are held up in there. We may have, even the field house, we may have to look, depending on what else is scheduled throughout the day. The tiered lecture hall is a pretty good sized room, and in most hours, it's not even close to being full. But in the event that we have a situation where there's a large number of subs for a particular hour, or absences for a particular hour, then we're probably gonna have to get more creative.
Couple things, I would think it'd be safe to say that your lecture hall, you could probably fit 2 classes in there and still having social distance, I'm guessing, right?
Oh, yes, I think the capacity is over 100.
Yeah, and then my other question is, at the high school, do we utilize any other subs, like individual in classrooms? We do, right?
Yes.
Besides just the,
Yep, for any special ed teachers, because it's part of a student's IEP that they have those minutes of direct service. And so any substitutes that are needed for a special ed classroom, all of our special ed teachers will have a sub in their classroom, along with like our alt ed, for instance, is a self-contained classroom. And so to have some of those students come into the tiered lecture hall wouldn't exactly work. So there are a few where we have substitutes in the classroom.
I needed to ask this for a while because obviously you guys, it's going really well, but I just have to think back when I was in high school, you missed a class and then you go to this tiered lecture hall, that would have been a disaster. Especially for the group of people that I was hanging out with. Like, so what actually happens in the tiered lecture hall? Do they get like an online lesson plan they have to finish by the end of the period? Do they check out with the person that is then conducting, the instruction in there? Because that's gonna be tough.
So the person that's in there is actually one of our retired teachers, which is really nice. And so she is very familiar with the district and with a lot of our students. So I know that does help. But in her absence, she's actually hired as a supervisory aide. So her job is to take attendance, to make sure that students are, not sitting too close to one another and that they're actually productive during that time. Teachers have the option of sending, and this is what we really prefer. I know Casey has really pushed hard to make sure that teachers have lessons prepared that the students can access on their Chromebooks. So it's very much like a very quiet study hall. The times that I've been in there, it's been very quiet and very productive. And if they don't have something to do through their Chromebook, the teacher may have dropped off assignments so they can do some paper and pencil things. And there are some classes that struggle with that a little bit more, like a music class, for instance. I mean, you can't have, 40 students in there and all practicing their instruments. And so at that point, then something different has to be kind of put in place. But that's on the teacher. That's the expectation that we've asked of our teachers. So it actually runs really smoothly. I think the most chaos probably happens when there are larger groups and then they have to look for some additional spaces. One of the other things that we've done is, and I've said this, that we're very open to with large groups. If we know in advance that there's a day where there are gonna be a lot of teachers gone, then we can bring in an additional sub to help with that. Either take a group to a different location or have that person in a classroom. So we've allowed the flexibility for that to happen as well.
To your point though, Chris, it really comes down to how well the teachers prepare in most cases. And I think back to 1994, AP Chemistry, Portage High School, we hated when a teacher was gone. He wasn't gone very often. He planned ahead. He would record himself doing the lesson. So we still have a sub in the room, because subs were plentiful back then. but it was a recorded lesson, and I mean, there was a quiz and the whole works. It can be done, and I think what we've done with this remote learning in this past spring, I think some of our teachers are getting better at using some of those online tools, and whether it be through Google Classroom or using other tools that are out there. I think we're going to see an improvement in those remote lessons that can be used when a teacher's gone. Now, certainly there are some unplanned absences and emergencies that, at that point, you're just trying to make sure that everyone's supervised, and if we can provide some additional learning during those emergency times, we do. But if those planned absences especially, I think that's one thing Mr. Drake is going to focus on next year is really making sure that those absent lessons are very well done.
It seemed like my son was in that some this past year in the tiered lecture hall, and it seemed like the norm for him was that the teachers had a lesson plan that they had to work on, were expected to complete before the next class. But not all teachers did it, but that was, for the most part, that was the norm. So, but I realize that changes depending on what class you may have.
But the days of putting the VHS tape in and pressing play, I think those are pretty well done. Might be a YouTube video, but even there, I think the expectations are changed.
Any other questions? Amy?
So I just guess, just a comment, I would guess they might get better at it now since they've had to do some online teaching, like the last, 2 or 3 months. So that might,
I agree.
so that might be an improvement, just because of the circumstance.
Charlie?
With the success of that process at the high school, have you considered moving that down to the middle school?
Sam, I'll answer that. We have considered it. We prefer not to. Our preference would be not to. I have told Mr. Betcher that he needs to develop a plan for next year, knowing that the fall especially could be problematic with subs. But we're also looking at things, depending on how bad it is, especially if we're in some sort of staggered alternating schedule, there may be times when certain, groups, maybe they won't even come to school for a certain part of a day. I don't think you would do that if it was just one teacher out or something like that. But yeah, or a group of third graders, I mean, there's certain limitations to where I think that could be successful, but it is something that we're looking at the middle school level, but it's not our preference.
Chris?
There was one thing that I've been thinking about is that sometimes it's really hard on teachers to come up with these things that spread moment. There's a lot of pressure on them anyway. Do you guys ever think of doing like a standalone learning programs for watching like a documentary, giving feedback on it, things that can give them, whether it's social emotional learning or ways which they get so that they expand their horizons a little bit, like just things that they can do. That could be stand-in, plug-in programs, so when you don't have the ability to have a well-done lesson plan, that they can still have something to do when they're in this event tiered lecture hall. You know what I mean?
Well,
agricultural stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what I was thinking.
Well, yeah, we'll do a blanket agricultural program for the emergency lesson. No, every teacher's supposed to have an emergency lesson also. So, ideally a teacher would have a lesson that's, along with the pacing and everything that's going on in the class at that time. But every teacher is supposed to have an emergency lesson as well. And many times those emergency lessons are similar to what you're talking about.
Okay, any other questions for Sam? Very good, Sam, thank you.
Nice report, really good, thank you.
Move on to 4D, Strategic Planning Scorecard for 2019-2020. Joe?
So Charlie had the suggestion last meeting, and it really, Brian just took off with it. Him and I talked right after the meeting, and I really appreciate Brian's work in putting the template together here. And then the rest of the leadership team helped fill it in. And this is just a terrific document that shows the measurements having to do with the strategic plan. We focused so much on the previous report on the actions taken, but there certainly is a difference between actions and results, whereas this scorecard really is more focused on the results. So I'm not sure, board members, if you want to go through each one or how you prefer to go about this. But what I do want to say is, you can see that many of the areas are colored green, which means items are on target. Then there are some that are more of an orangish yellow, whatever that color would be. Those would be things that are not on target at this time. And then there's some great things that simply weren't able to be measured this year due to the pandemic. No school report cards, no, state assessment. So there are some great things as well. I do want to point out that, as we move forward, I don't necessarily think after 1 year, we need to reset these measurement goals. But like a good example would be the GAP one. And if I could just find that, I think it's pretty much towards the top. Yeah, it's actually the first one. So we had set a measurement goal of increasing GAP by at least 1% annually. Well, you can see there that, the first year of the program, there were 18. The next year there were 26. This last year there were 22. So did we meet the 1% increase? No. But do I consider that program not to be successful? Absolutely not. In fact, it's the state leader in terms of the number of GAP certificates. So I'm very, very proud of our GAP program, but I also realize that this is an opportunity for us to make a concerted effort next year with the advisor, with the students, with the teachers, and say, hey, we'd really like to see that number grow. Now, if we're able to explain that, we had a smaller senior class, or we had, just not as many students interested in that avenue, then I think, we can explain, where that number came from and decide whether or not we want to continue to try to have that as a measurement goal. But generally, I'm very, very proud of what's been done here, and I guess that'll open up to any questions or comments.
I think, I'll just start off by saying, Joe, I really, really like this.
And I'd like to I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Andy.
I just want to thank Charlie for the idea because it looks really good.
Don't give him the big head. It was a good idea. Anybody have questions specifically about certain things in the report? I have one, but if other people have stuff. Okay, one thing I looked at, which was kind of eye-opening for me, if you go down to the baseline for energy savings, and you look at the benchmarking data that was provided by Xcel Energy on our different school sites and that really surprised me, how the different schools were rated and where they were at. Especially Downsville, we put in a geothermal unit down there, and we obviously have some work to do to get that building up to snuff as far as, utilizing that. Even Wakanda being I think it was Wakanda, I'm going off memory here, being a newer building, wasn't as good as Oaklawn and a couple of the other ones that were really shining stars. But I just think it's a neat in here. I like the links that you have on different things, and the color code is nice. I really like it. So thank you.
We'll plan on, I can't wait to put the next column in next year.
Charlie?
Very nicely done, thank you.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Changes to employee handbook for 2020, 2021.
I don't know that I need to read the document for the board, other than to tell you that throughout the year, we track the employee handbook. Sam does a lot of the work, and then her and I meet. Some of these ideas come from QIC, some of them come from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, some of them come from the notes we jot down, the situations we dealt with the previous school year, and then from there we come up with recommendations for improving the handbook. With that being said, I don't know that I need to read through it. Are there any specific questions that board members have on any of the items?
Jim?
I have a question. It's not so much specific to any of these changes, but you did that where you pooled hours on health insurance for COVID.
Yes.
Was that I didn't see it addressed in here anywhere. Is that just a temporary thing? Is that going to go away, or how is that going to be dealt with?
That was a plan specific to COVID, and the employee bank will be redistributed this summer.
Okay.
And then as we move towards next fall, we'll have to decide based on the circumstances whether or not that's something to move forward. We are not recommending a full-blown sick leave bank or anything like that.
Okay.
Moving into the future. It's something we've talked about in the past, and something we'll probably continue to talk about. But to use the COVID bank and what we did specifically for COVID to a long-standing procedure, I don't think is something we want to do at this time.
Okay.
Joe, maybe you kind of covered it there, but is there going to be like a case by case, like say there's a situation where maybe there's a district employee that's been in our district a long time, they have a planned surgery or something like that, they've exhausted all of their sick leave and rolls over obviously at the beginning of the year, but they lost some that they maybe accrued. How is a situation like that can be handled going forward?
Well, the good news is that our school district has a very generous sick leave policy. So every employee is able to accumulate additional sick leave every year. So I think most of our employees would have paid leave to cover, more than 2 weeks. And I think for almost all employees, then there's also FMLA to consider. So at this point, we're not planning on any kind of banking or donation of sick leaves. But that's not to say that if there was a specific case, that's something the board could look at individually, or if in the event that we felt because of COVID or something like that, that our sick leave policy was not adequate, we could bring forward a policy change at any board meeting and ask the board to make that adjustment.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Dave, just to not gloss over it, I do think it's important that, probably one of the items that would receive the most attention in here is the change in terms of notice of reduction of staff for hourly employees. Currently, our employee handbook has a 30-day notice. And one thing that has been found out across the state really has been many districts have a level of notice that could be considered problematic in terms of the school district's finances and the school district's ability to be mobile in the event of an emergency like we had. Now, even if we had, a lower amount, I don't know that we would have done anything differently. But the legal advice that school districts have received from a number of advisors, including the School Board Association, is to look at that amount of notice. In fact, some of the suggestions had, really just provide 1 day notice. We didn't think that was fair. We asked our hourly staff members to give us 2 weeks notice in the event that they're going to leave the school district. So we felt like we wanted to move it down from 30 days, but we felt if we were asking for 2 weeks, that we owed hourly employees at least 2 weeks notice. I'm not planning to have to use any kind of layoff. I think, we've talked about our district being in good standing and, that we fully expect and we appreciate the work that these people do. At the same time, I don't think it would be responsible based on the advice we're receiving not to take a look at that and make a modification.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Oh, Jim, sorry.
Yeah, so one of the first changes on, it says 7.03 reimbursement, special education license stuff.
Yes.
In reading, it says that they may request reimbursement, but I didn't see anything in there that said like what the process is or what the criteria are for granting the request. Is that someplace else, or how does that get decided?
Well, there's not just one issue in there because we're talking about special ed paraeducators.
Right.
That's reimbursement after the school year because then we're able to capture the special education aid. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. We simply, we know when people are going through, if they're a new para, we'll let them, we go through that process with them to help them obtain their license. The others that are talked about in here might apply to, let's say, a custodial person who is getting an additional certification. So we ask them to let us know if it's something that we request of them, like the special ed paras. It's not a requirement for them, but in order for us to capture aid and to be in compliance with ESSA, we have to have them have the special ed aid license. So they get in touch with me. I also keep a running list of people, and so it's kind of a combination of that communication.
Does that answer your question, Chuck?
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
One was good. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to item F, board advocacy for the support of public schools. Before we get into this, Amy had sent in, we talked last meeting about this, Amy talked about possibly drafting something. Before the WASB guidance came out, Tanya had also sent a draft letter to me, and I asked Tanya's permission to include that tonight as well. So just so you know, that's why that's included in there as well. So, Amy, did you want to start?
Well, first of all, Tanya, that's a great letter. I like it a lot. It seems more personal to you, as a school board member. I don't know if it's, for the whole school board to sign, but.
I think that was her intent.
That was my intent.
So, and you already sent that?
No, I was holding up.
Okay, just curious. But yeah, you made a lot of great points. What I liked about the WASB template was that they asked you to name a lot of positive things first, because I think legislators get bogged down by people always asking for money or funding, or whatever. So I kind of took that template and I just rewrote or just wrote the things I felt were important as far as our board is concerned, and mine is in red, and I also put some of our survey results, and then they also asked for examples, so I put Ann Hassey's stuff and Julie Hyden's in there, so they could see. Now, whether they're gonna take time to do all that, maybe we need to do more brief, I don't know, but they were asking for some of those things, I thought that I would just put them in there. And then, come up with some things, and then, I don't know if you told you where, I wasn't sure about, where it says a few figures may help explain our district shift, it's like the, I don't know, 1, 2, 3.
I see it, Amy.
Okay.
I just haven't had a chance to get to it since I got this, but I will.
Yeah, but if you have any idea, we can add it, because I don't know how many online or whatever, but I don't think it has to be specific, I think it can be maybe a ballpark figure. To just look, they'll know that we really did expend ourselves with Zoom meetings and so forth. So yeah, and obviously it has to be in probably more letter form. I just took the template and just went right up a bit and added my own stuff in red.
If the board would like, I could take Amy's draft and work on it a little bit, massage it a little bit, touch base with Amy, and then bring back another version for the board to look at the next meeting. If that's okay with Amy?
It's fine. Thank you.
I'm fine with that. I would encourage Tanya to send, your version as well, and if any other board members, because I think one of the strengths we have is, communication privately with legislators, things of that nature, so.
Does the board want to have a joint letter, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea for the board to send a letter as well as individual.
I think this is a very well done, Amy, so.
Thank you.
Tanya as well, thank both of you.
Oh, yeah, I think you did a great job. Very well done.
Any other comments from the board?
So Tanya's could be used as an example of a type of individual communication, and then Amy's will be worked on a little bit for potential full board communication.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, both of you, and Joe. Item G, calendar of board reports. And just for the newer members, this is when we're gonna have reports at every meeting, basically for the next 12 months, so if there's anything in there, that you want to change or move around or whatever, now's your chance to talk about it. So.
A couple things I want to point out, Dave. This is somewhat of a working document every year. When I came, this is something we did, in every year we add to it based on what we feel the board discussions have been and what the board would like to look at. So it is a working document. Sometimes the report schedule has changed a little bit based on the workload and availability of the different people providing the reports, but we usually stay pretty close to it. We kind of did some editorial updates to it. There were some outdated names and things that we changed since the original version went on Thursday, but the reports themselves did not change.
Any questions or things that you don't see that you'd like to, or comments? I like the format. Chris?
Of course, I'd like to see more ag here, some ag reports, but it would be nice if we got a report from the diversity committee at the beginning, right at the beginning of the school year. We put our heads together, this is what we're thinking about, and really address that right at the beginning. That would be a really great talking point for us addressing the things that are very timely.
Right. Would you like that to coincide with the gap report that we talked about previously?
Oh, yeah,
Kind of do that all at once?
that sounds good. What report?
Well, we talked about, an achievement gap report. Okay, we'll put that together as one full report. That'll be nice.
Hopefully you heard that, Steve. Mike?
Can we get the people from the diversity committee to come? That would be interesting to see, not just us, but to see who's on it. I don't know. That's just would be nice as part of the report to have someone come here and present on what they're doing.
We'll take a look at it.
Okay, anything else on this one? Amy?
I like it, I think it's really great. One thing, I can't remember if we discussed this before, that we were gonna look at the bullying policies once a year. I couldn't know if that's on there or not. But we were gonna try to get once a year just to review.
That's a really good catch there, Amy. Let us review that, we'll make
I
sure.
just thought of it just now.
Yeah, that's a really good, that should be on this calendar for sure.
Good.
Taking on that, where's that fit in here?
I'll have to look at it. I don't know, unless you have a suggestion where you want it.
Amy, do you have a suggestion on that?
I do not. I'm thinking probably, I would think January might be a good time, I don't know, middle of the year.
I'd let Joe figure out where.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, kind of look and see where when we passed it. I think that was kind of the intent.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Anything else? Okay, moving on, extracurricular staff contract requests, we have none. Letter I, items related to next meeting date, board committees and reports, our next two meetings in July are the 13th and the 27th. Item J, changes to future district notices and meeting postings, Joe.
So we were notified that the Dunn County News is going to be publishing once a week, starting soon. And in looking at the legal requirements in terms of posting meeting agendas and what that would mean in terms of us and our timing of having to get the meeting agenda to the Dunn County News, we feel like now is a reasonable time to change our posting procedures. You all know we created that new website this year, which people can sign up and automatically have the agendas and minutes sent to them. Otherwise, if we post in the newspaper, it's going to be such a skeleton of an agenda that it really is not going to be close to being timely. And then you look at the cost of posting. I think at this point, we're recommending that we take a look at the new law change and post on our website, and then also at least the AFC front door, and then when schools are in session at the schools, and then also the Menomonie Public Library, that will meet the posting requirements based on state law. Any questions or concerns on that?
Is this anything we have to change in the policy, Joe, or?
I reviewed policy a little bit on it, Dave, and I didn't see anything that would require board action.
Okay, any questions or comments?
The only question would be, Dave, about the minutes. With the Dunn County News not being published in Menomonie, that could also provide the board the opportunity to no longer pay to have the minutes published. I'm a little less inclined to do that. I do think that having the minutes in the paper is something that is helpful for some of our constituents. Also, it provides kind of, a formalized record of the meetings. I mean, the minutes are published on our website, and we certainly will continue to do that. The only question is whether the board wants to continue with the expense of having them in the paper as well.
I think the minutes in the newspaper are good, only for the fact that maybe there's some people that just don't get the online, but can get the hard copy.
Just a question, we put our agendas on the school district website. Can you put links and things or notices on Twitter and other Facebook and sort of things like, here is our agenda, can you click on this and you can see it to kind of get the word out even more than it is?
We could. We don't have a media specialist here in the school district, but.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, Twitter links should be pretty easy to do, and stuff like that. Just to make, since we're gonna lose the paper, just to make it as widely accessible as possible, so that kind of thing.
How about a link on Twitter to the website that?
That's what I'm saying, yeah, because once you post it on there, you create a URL and all that good stuff, and you can just slap that on Twitter and look at here's our latest board agenda, and you click on it and boom, you're there.
Sure.
We do stuff like that at the Wildlife Federation all the time, so they can figure it out.
Amy?
Could it be something that Jamie could do as far as you always send it to us, maybe the same day that you give us the link to the agenda that it goes out on Twitter? I mean, I don't know.
We'll take a look at it. I'm sure we can do it, it's just a matter of,
I mean, I don't want to put any more work on anybody, but I just feel like that would be easy just to put that link in there at the same time.
I think Joe's our Twitter guy, right?
It takes a lot of time. But yes, we can do that.
Clint?
And I know Steve also a lot of times tweets out our meeting agendas. I know he has a pretty good following.
I'm gonna say, I think Penny and I talked about this like a year ago, because the inconsistency sometimes of the video and stuff. Is there legal issues with this as far as what we put out there? YouTube, Twitter, as far as the video? I know Penny had talked to a friend or something that's at another district, and there was some issue, if I remember right.
The issue they were facing, and he's the board president in another district, and the issue that they were potentially facing is if they did not live stream and they, as a district, recorded the meetings, they had to do closed captioning, multiple languages, different things. So as long as we're covering ourselves as far as if we put it out on Twitter or how it goes out in social media, I think that that's just something we should be mindful of. Not necessarily the video, and because Steven's doing it independently from the district, I think that we're somewhat insulated in regards to that, but just how we're putting things out in social media, I think we just need to be aware of.
Yeah,
For
it'll
sure.
be-
I don't disagree with it. I think the more, and I've when I've had time to be more active on Facebook, I've posted minutes and notes and different things from the meetings, but I just want to make sure that the district is safe from any of those possible issues.
Joe?
Yeah, there's no issues with posting the agenda. That's not a problem at all. But in the event that we actually recorded our meetings, there are a number of ADA issues that we would have to consider. Also a number of records retention issues that we would have to consider. So it can be done, but with most districts, there's an independent agency that is doing that. Most places it's like a cable access channel that is doing it based on, I think in some cases, it's actually part of the grant funding that they have. They have to provide a certain number of public services, and a lot of times school board is one of them. We don't have that in our community, so it would be all on us. So I appreciate Steve doing it, but I would caution the board, that'd be a fairly large expense. We've looked at that before, and I prefer to keep that money in the classroom if we can.
I agree, and I know Joe and I talked about, sorry, Dave. I know Joe and I talked about it when I was new on the board, because I figured, well, what's the big deal, why can't we publish this and get it out there? But as long as we have Steve at our disposal, it's great. We're just in a kind of weird market though, as far as we're big enough, but we're not too big to have like a public access channel or something like that. But I know constituents that would like to see more of this out there, especially given with what's just happened. We've had some constituents that have written the board basically concerned that, the audio was bad or video was bad and all this stuff. And I do think it's important if people are interested enough to pay attention and concerned enough about our community that we should have that available for them. I know there's a lot more expense, Joe, so I kind of opened up a whole other can of worms on you, but sorry.
Well, the board can do it, but yeah, it's.
Okay, so,
I just have one quick question on that. I don't know if this has anything to do with this is even something that I need to talk about, but for instance, let's say like last time, we didn't have a reporter here, we didn't have Steve here, it wasn't live streamed or anything like that, but people still could have come. But if somebody's afraid to come, or if they're ill, or if they have a pandemic, is that an ADA issue?
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, if we have a certain number of chairs set up, we are required to make this a public meeting, but it doesn't mean you have to accommodate any number of people. We need to make a good faith effort. I mean, if we thought that 100 people were coming tonight and we somehow knew that, then we should change the location that could accommodate more people. But if all of a sudden, we're set up like this and 100 people show up, we would, stop attendance at the chairs that are socially distanced, and that's not a violation of open meetings at all.
Just curious.
okay, so just to summarize the item J, we're gonna start posting our agendas strictly online or at district office
Yes.
buildings, no longer in the newspaper.
Correct.
We'll continue to do our meeting minutes in the newspaper, and we'll try to work on something as far as the Twitter, as far as getting agenda items or agendas.
We can do it.
Jim?
We're currently posting at the library too, correct?
We'll continue our physical postings as we have.
Okay.
Yeah, we go beyond what's required by the open meetings law. We'll continue to do that. The The only difference is we won't be putting the paper anymore for the meeting agendas.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we're finished. Motion to adjourn. Amy, second. Charlie, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. It's my son's 18th birthday tomorrow.